Hello, Bob, and thanks for sparing some time to speak with us today. First of all, let me congratulate you once again on winning the 2020 Phillip J. Klass Lifetime Achievement Award at this year's Aviation Week Laureates. In our recognition of your award, we noted that you fell into aviation almost by accident, thanks to the downturn in the 1970s in the automobile industry, which is really, let's face it, your first love, right? But it was at Pratt Whitney where you recently retired as president, where your leadership skills really flourished, and particularly as it happened during the time when basically you were able to see the company through the buildup of the critically important F-135, the military engine, as well as see the sort of commercial introduction of the geared turbofan family through to success. So before we get into some of the challenges you faced there and overcame, it's also interesting to note that you came back after retiring not just once but twice. So in this pandemic era, where obviously some of the people that may be watching us have been, unfortunately forced to retire earlier than planned, and they may need to come back for the recovery. I think it'd be curious for, everybody would like to know what it was from that invitation that you got from the chairman of UTC, Greg Hayes, that you couldn't refuse.
Well, you couldn't make the story up, to be honest with you. So I retired originally from UTC in 2013 from UTC Aerospace Systems. You'll recall, Guy, at that point, Hamilton/Goodrich had won quite a bit of content on the 787. And I actually was involved in the middle of that, the development of that. And that was a long and arduous task. There were long weeks and long years. And at the end of it, I said, this has been great. But after working 80-hour weeks for, the better part of a few years, I decided that maybe it was time for me to go home. I left, I went into private equity for a little while, and lo and behold, surprise to me, Greg Hayes called me and asked me to go to lunch with him one day. So I did, and during the course of that lunch, he asked me if I'd be willing to come back and help him decide what to do with Sikorsky Helicopter Company. It was either we're going to sell it or we were going to spin it off as its own private entity. And as you know, eventually we were able to sell it to Lockheed Martin. That took about 9 months. And at that point, I went home again. My task had been done. Greg called me 8 or 9 weeks later and asked me if I'd be willing to do one more thing for him, to come back and help Pratt get through some difficult times, to be honest. They were struggling with the GTF development, the multiple models of it. And it took some soul searching because I knew it was going to be long, it was going to be hard. I had been out of Pratt, since 13. It had been a good 3 or 4 years since I'd been out of Pratt. A little bit of unknown. But at the end of the day, Pratt's the company I always loved. It's where I grew up. I loved working with the people. And at the end of the day, I couldn't stand the thought of Pratt not being respected in the industry as I felt that they should be. So I agreed to come back.
Fantastic. So obviously, Bob, we've got an audience here that includes some of the industry's top program managers and project leaders. Can we dive into a bit of the detail about what you had to tackle, coming back to the company that you loved like that, and how you're able to basically affect this shakeup? Just anywhere that you'd like to start, really.
Well, when I got back, to be honest, I found an organization that was a bit demoralized. I think they had worked tirelessly and unfortunately weren't being successful. And when I came in and I looked at the program, it became readily apparent to me that Pratt had abandoned what we had done pretty successfully in the 777, which was we did integrated product development, which is basically, it's not just engineering doing development program, it's engineering, it's operations, making sure that they can produce the parts at cost. It's customer service to make sure the engine's serviceable, will meet its maintenance cost targets. It's, it's finance to make sure you're basically balancing your budget with what your target is and making your business case. It's a cross-functional approach to development. we basically had to resurrect that and reconstruct it. And to be honest, in the early days, it was difficult, right? It wasn't mature. A lot of the people that had worked at Pratt had not experienced integrated product development. We had to do a fair amount of retraining. All the while, we were in the middle of all these development programs. We were doing not only the 220, but we were doing the 320. We were doing the Embraer program and programs rather. We were doing the Russian program. We had 4 or 5 development programs concurrently. That unfortunately the schedule had basically collapsed on us. Airplane programs slipped, others accelerated, others held schedule to the point we actually ended up with 5 development programs on top of one another. So it was a matter of trying to get that organized under integrated product development and making sure that we were able to, in a disciplined way, approach the development of those programs. I will tell you, as a program development project manager guy, a couple of lessons learned for, I think, everybody that is one. One, you got to get a good set of requirements from your customer. If you don't get a good set of requirements from your customer, you have no way of being able to deliver a product at the end of the day that meets their expectations. And it sounds like a very simple thing, but I can tell you that more often than not, you don't get a full set of requirements, and they actually evolve during the course of the development program. Makes it really hard to design to a moving target. I think the other thing is schedule. We all would like to think we can do an engine development program in 4 years. My experience would suggest you can. You can certify an engine in 4 years, but you can't have an engine that's, I would say, reliable at service entry, mature at service entry. You need 6 or 7 years to do that. And my experience was on the 777, we took about 6 years, and that was the best engine development program we ever had. That engine was ETOPS out of the box. It basically met all its maintenance cost guarantees, met its cost guarantees, but we took the time, we had the time to do the appropriate development testing and the like. And a lot of times on the GTF, unfortunately, we didn't allow ourselves that time. And I think that's a big lesson learned as well.
Well, yeah, and of course you raise a good point there, because one of the key tenets, I think, of what you're talking about here is the idea of resetting expectations by kind of re-baselining the program plan and schedule, because you were juggling so much there. Could you sort of speak a little bit about how that, I mean, that takes a lot of guts to do that, I think, but it's obviously something which you really had to do.
It was certainly easier inside because you were able to convince the team. The team knew they needed more time, they needed more budget. They knew that. The tougher conversation is with your customer, both your OEM customer and your airline customers, because promises have been made that fundamentally hadn't been kept. So we had to go out and re-baseline. I have to tell you, it was not pleasant. People were upset, and they should have been. They were told that A was going to happen, and unfortunately it never happened. So in one way it was, I think they said finally they're admitting to their shortcomings, but in another way they were disappointed. They were planning on having those airplanes in service and providing lift and making revenue. And in fact, we were late. And it was a well-known fact we were late, not only in terms of the development, but in terms of the manufacturing ramp. We were very late on that.
But of course, you know, that really did lead to the next part, which is how do you ramp up like that? Because, you know, you have to, first of all, figure out how to communicate with the supply chain to really stabilize that kind of balance of demand and what they can supply. And then, of course, you've got to work on the ramp itself and building up infrastructure and all the supporting aspects of that. Can you kind of talk about those two elements a bit?
So I got an earful from the suppliers when I came back. I can remember we held a supplier conference, which we typically did every year. And of course, you know, I was showing them their delivery metrics and their quality metrics. And of course, there was outcry in the audience that, you know, if you would give us a schedule that you would stick to, this would all be a lot easier. And so I did a little digging, and sure enough, our schedule stability was awful. We were constantly moving schedule. Every single day of the week, we were readjusting schedule, quantities, timing. And so we made a decision, we're going to freeze schedule for a 90-day window. So outside of 90 days, we'll give ourselves luxury to move the schedule as we saw fit. But in the next 90-day window, the schedule we gave them was the schedule we're going to keep, and we expected them to deliver to that. Now, it didn't happen overnight, but I will tell you that over the course of a year, 2 years, when we were consistently holding schedule stability, all of a sudden we saw a miraculous improvement in performance. No surprise, but part of that was on us. We weren't disciplined enough to hold the schedule stable. The other side of it, some of the suppliers didn't invest in the way they should have. They kind of bet against us that really the schedule is going to be this large. It's been a long time since Pratt produced this number of large commercial engines. And I think there were a fair number of suppliers that second guessed us. So if we told them we needed 700 engines next year, they may say, you know what, maybe it's 500. We're going to schedule for 500. And we had to flush that out. And we really couldn't until we gave them a stable schedule. So it wasn't easy. Shane Eddy, who ran operations for me, he did a miraculous job in righting the ship there. The other thing we did was we put a lot of metrics in place. We actually started to look out a year ahead to see whether or not the suppliers had reached raw material, whether they're in line, they had the machining capacity, they had the capital plan to support it. That hadn't been done prior either. And so that also helped us to get some discipline in that supply chain. And the same was true of us internally. We were a little bit behind on our capital deployment. There had been some decisions made before my time that they shortchanged capital a few years. And unfortunately, that's hard to catch up because the lead time on some of this machine equipment is 18, 24 months. So we had to scramble around that as well. So they all kind of interconnected. Our internal capacity, the supplier capacity, and having to have the conversation with the customers that this is all we're going to be able to deliver.
And how difficult was it for you to then recognize the need for obviously staffing up? You saw a looming wave of potential retirements of people with a lot of experience. And at the same time, you realize you probably had to beef up automation too.
Yeah, that was one of my big initiatives. So, and I don't think it was unique to Pratt. It was kind of an aerospace issue. The demographics of the aerospace industry was such that, within a 10-year frame from 2016, we saw about half of our population being retirement eligible. That's both our production associates and our office associates. And it was a little bit terrifying because engineering, you probably thought, okay, you'll be able to fix engineering, because engineering, to be honest with you, we had a pretty good relationship with a bunch of target schools we used, UConn being one of them. And we were able to recruit pretty successfully. The issue was the trades. A lot of parents don't tell their kids to go into trades, they tell them to go to four-year university. And so the pool of people that were in the trades that you're going to be able to draw from was nowhere near what we were going to need. So we established programs with a lot of community colleges. I can tell you it was a topic at AIA because we weren't alone in that regard. And so we started to say we need to recruit more. And actually, if you would have walked the Middletown assembly floor, you would have seen quite a few younger folks working down on that assembly floor, people that were 30 years of age or younger. And, they had a whole different perspective about productivity, work ethic, and the like. That's not to criticize anyone that had been there for years, but they were more open to new approaches to manufacturing productivity. And at the end of the day, we were able to basically keep up with the demand. We never really ran short. Of course, the current situation says that maybe we don't have as large a problem as we once thought because volumes are down quite a bit, and it's anybody's guess as to when they come back. But that trade, that side on the production side is the one that was most worrisome. And I can tell you, I sit on a few other boards today, and they still have that worry longer term, not maybe by the middle of the 20s, but certainly by the early 2030 timeframe. So again, I think that's my opinion. It's got to take a national effort. I think there's got to be a national program for apprenticeship so that we can get not only people that can work on aircraft engines and airplanes, but whether it's your automobile or anything else, because there is definitely a shortage wherever you look.
Right, and of course The thing is, you quite rightly mentioned the fact that we're on the edge of who knows when, a long, slow recovery period. But I think the bottom line is it seems like you left Pratt in a good position to at least be able to be, well prepared for what's coming, and at least a good starting point for this recovery that we all hope is out there.
I appreciate you saying that, but it never feels that way. It's, there's always a million things to do, and you never quite get it to where you really want it. But I think we certainly made strides. I think the other thing I worked really hard on was culture. I mentioned earlier that when I first came back, people were pretty demoralized. They didn't feel like there was hope, a future, even though we had this massive backlog, and we had the F-35 actually as well. But people wanted to have a voice. People wanted to think that we were going to listen to them and actually take their ideas forward. And when I got there, there was none of that. The top of the house knew everything. There was no need to solicit input from the lower ranks. And I just saw that as a huge opportunity for us. So I actually stumbled, and I really mean this, stumbled across a leadership program at Thayer, Leadership Development Group on the campus of West Point. Basically, it's the Army's leadership model, which is about respect. It was about driving down decision-making to the lowest levels, about being on the same page, diversity. It was all the things I valued. And I put almost 2,600 people through that program over the course of 3 years. And I will tell you that our voluntary attrition rate, which was 8% when I came back in 2016, was down to less than 2% by the time I left earlier this year. So people actually could feel it, and you could see it in our employee scores. And I think that had as much to do with us digging out from the hole we're in than anything, because we could have done all these other things. Actually, I don't think we could have done all these other things because people weren't as engaged as I think they could have been. But by the time I left, I felt pretty good about the culture. And of course, time will tell whether or not it stands the test of time. And of course, in these difficult circumstances, that's really the ultimate test. Will the culture stick given the circumstances that the industry faces today?
Well, yeah, well, I know when you finished, you said you were a glutton for punishment, and you retired for a third. And of course, you claimed last time at the end of 2019. Is it really the last time, Bob? I mean, obviously you're on the board of several companies, but
yes, 1,000 times yes. I have had an incredible career. I have been blessed every step of the way to work with fabulous people, because without a good team of people around you, you really can't accomplish anything. I've always had exciting projects to work on. Everything was a challenge. And I love the industry, and I love the people that were in the industry. It's unique unto itself. I've always believed that. I got to work on anything from the spacesuit to, air management systems, to jet engines, to helicopters. I mean, I really couldn't ask for more. It's really been a blessing to me. And, but I think like anything else, time moves on. And my approach to leadership, though it had a time and place, it may not have a time and place in the future. It may take something else, but I would like to think I left it better than I found it, because that's all of us can only really hope for. And I really enjoyed my time. I really did.
Well, wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Bob, for sharing your insights. Such a great group of valuable lessons there, I think, for everybody in our industry. And all the very best as you go forward with all these other endeavors. And good luck with the golf as well. And thanks so much. And we'll see you again. And at this point, I'd like to hand back to Carol.